We were driving up this road over here, going up a mountain, and we came across this lake. And I said, I gotta stop and do another film here. You can hear the cars going behind us there. Isn't that a delightful little island there with that tree? Right in the middle of the island, there's a little picnic table there. And normally there'd be boats out, but there's been a huge storm that's just gone overhead. We got caught into it, a little bit of it, and now it's moved on. So we're the only ones here at the moment because of the storm that's come through. If you look down here, you can see some paddle boats. This is a great recreation area for people that want to just come and get out of the plains below up into the mountains. And I love these kind of places. From that frog pond that we were in this before, back to this beautiful little quiet lake up in the mountain. A mountain lake, just gorgeous up here. Nice and quiet. And we're asking the question whether or not the Qur'an, this book here, is for everyone and everywhere. We're moving into a new area, and that is this claim that this is a universal book, that this is a book that anybody can use at any time, anywhere, for really as a litmus, or you might say as a foundation for life. And I'm going to confront that, and we're going to go and do a few videos just on this question. And I'm going to start out by asking, when you look at the Quran itself, in Surah chapter 16 verse 103, also chapter 26 verse 195, and chapter 42 verse 7, it refers to an Arabic character for the Quran, that this is an Arabic book. We talked about earlier in another segment about Surah 12 ayah 2 and Surah 13 ayah 37, and especially Surah 41 ayah 41, and we really zeroed in on verse 44, which says that this is an Arab book written by an Arab prophet. In fact, it said very clearly that this could not be written in another language, and it questions whether or not why that would ever be written in another language. So it's obvious that this book is for the Arab people, for the Arab time, written by an Arab man. So that right there shows that this is a specific book for a specific people, for a specific time, written by a specific man. But that man especially, when you look at the Quran, you will see that there is story after story that follow his life, especially in chapter 33. When you look at chapter 33, looking at verse 36 to 38, you see the story of Zayd and Zaynab. Zayd and Zaynab. Zayd has a beautiful wife named Zaynab. And Zaynab comes to visit Muhammad, and he talks about her beauty, and she goes home and tells Zayd what Muhammad said, and quickly he decides to divorce her so Muhammad could have her as a wife. That is a specific problem that it's a problem for me. I don't know if it is for those watching it, but it would be a problem for me to have anybody give up their wife so that a prophet could have her as his wife, just because he said she was beautiful. And turns out he then takes her as his wife, and that caused enough problems. You can see that there's an awful lot of problems. In chapter 66, verse 1 and 2, you can see another revelation is sent down to say that pretty much Muhammad could do whatever he wants, and that he can even give up his oaths if he wants to. Specifically talking and solving a problem for Muhammad, referring to Zayd and Zaynab. Chapter 33, verse 50 to 52, it talks about the rotation of Muhammad's wives, how he can go from one wife to another, and the privileges that are specifically for Muhammad. It continues on chapter 33, verse 53 and 54, talks about Muhammad's privacy, and that his widows were not to marry anybody else. Now, what is this doing in a book that's supposed to be universal for everyone? What's that got to do with you and me? What's that got to do with anybody outside of Muhammad? So you can see, even when you come down to the stories in chapter 33 and chapter 66, it's very clear that this book is for one man and one man alone. And it's very clear for his problems with his own wives. And that, to me, when Muslims say that this is a universal book, that's not a universal reference for me. It has no code of ethics that I would want to follow, certainly not today. And if there is special privileges that are designated for Muhammad and him alone, then what is it doing in this book that's supposed to be a universal category for everybody at every place? Now, take a look down here. I just want to look down here. Look at this huge spider, enormous spider with a sack on it. That's all its little babies. It's going to have babies. And my cameraman here is very nervous because he is, what's the word? You're acrophobic, aren't you? You actually have a phobia of these very spiders. I'm not going to let you get any closer. He's starting to walk away because he's having a hard time looking at that spider. That is enormous, isn't it? Can you get down closer to it? No, that's all right. That's all right. Come back and let's continue with what we're talking about. These creatures just come up from everywhere. That's a mother spider with all her sack of baby ones about ready to give birth. So why would a universal document, if this is a universal document, why in the world is this? He's now looking around his feet to see if there's any more spiders ready to crawl up his leg. God bless you. Why would a universal document be talking about specific problems for one prophet, specific problems dealing with his own wives, and specific problems giving him, basically giving him free hand to do whatever he wants? See, so you can see that this is not a universal document. This is very specific to one man at one place in one time and with his own problems. He's a 7th century Arab prophet, and it's fascinating because he brings his own 7th century Arab solutions and then tries to universalize it. Let me give you some examples. Let me give you 3 examples of specific application, Arab application that you find in the Quran that really have nothing to do with you and me and should not be considered in a universal context. Look at the Arab language. We've already talked about this. The Arab language is considered by not only the Quran but also by Muslims as a divine language. Yet it's fascinating to me that this Arab language didn't even exist. I think the date that the earliest inscriptions they can find are from the 4th century AD. The Arab language comes out of the Nabatean script, which means it is a new language. It certainly didn't exist when Hebrew and Greek were being used, and if God in his wisdom had already given his revelation in Hebrew and Greek, why in the world would he then suddenly introduce a whole new language? My cameraman's just sitting there looking at that spider. He's having a hard time concentrating on what's happening. You can see the camera's jiggling because he's laughing now. Listen, you're going to be fine. The spider's going to stay where it is, and then we're going to stay over here. Now, that's the first problem. So that's the first difficulty, the language. To me also, I can't understand why God in his wisdom would have chosen a language that couldn't even accommodate the Qur'an itself. It cannot accommodate it because there were no diacritical marks, there was no vowelization, none of this existed at that time. And if that were the case, if this was supposed to be a universal document for all of mankind, then why in the world would he give it in a language that you could even read and write it? Secondly, the second problem I have are the practices and customs that you see in the Quran. The Quran is full of predatory war. It talks about slavery, about polygamy and concubinage. These have already been eradicated in the New Testament. We are no longer to be predatories. We are supposed to lay down the sword. We're not to live by the sword. That's in Matthew chapter 26, verse 62. Matthew 26, verse 52, and it's fascinating to me that you see also in the Bible you have referenced a whole new definition in Philemon's verse 16, where Paul redefines the whole category of slave. He says, no longer are you master to slave, you are now brothers in Christ. And Galatians 3:28 says there is no difference between man or woman, slave or free, Jew or Greek, all are equal in Jesus Christ. If that is the revelation we get in the 1st century, why then is slavery then reintroduced in the Quran if this is a universal document? That's already been eradicated by the New Testament, brought back by the Quran. Polygamy and concubinage. Well, concubinage doesn't even exist in the New Testament. It did possibly exist in the Old Testament, and certainly we do know that there was polygamy at the time of Abraham. But now Christ says very clearly that one man and one wife, bringing it back to what God had intended in Genesis chapter 2, where it is supposed to be one man and one woman for life. So you can see the Quran brings back in chapter 4, verse 3, where a man can have up to 4 wives. Up to 4 wives. The third problem that I see in the Quran is the whole Arab reference to Mecca itself. This one city that's supposed to be the city for all of mankind. This is the center of the universe. This is where Adam and Eve were thrown down to in chapter 7, verse 24 in the Quran. Yet we can't find any reference to it. If this is the oldest city of mankind, if Adam and Eve were there, then certainly it's the oldest inhabitant for mankind, yet we can't find any reference to the city in any documentation until 741 AD. That's 100 years after Muhammad. So can you see, that's a real problem. How can this city be so important? It's not on any map anywhere until 900 AD. Muhammad died in 632. So you're talking about a good 250 years later before it even gets placed on a map. Yet this is the city where Abraham went to in chapter 21, verse 51 to 71. What's Abraham doing in a city that didn't even exist? So you can see it's an awful lot of problems that I see with the Quran when it deals and it assumes that it has universal application. Muhammad seemed to have taken the Arab people as he found them and declared them good and superior. And this is something I get from Arabs all the time. There's something about the Muslim world that elevates Arabs above everybody else. Elevates their language above everyone else. Elevates their location above everywhere else. And as far as I can see, that has nothing to do with God. That has nothing to do with history. It has nothing to do with the previous scriptures. And it has nothing to do with you and me. So, is this book superior? Does it have universal qualities? Now, what I want to do next, and that's we're going to do starting with the next 2 episodes or 3 episodes, I'm going to go in and we're going to actually ask more specifically, is this a book for women? Let's look and unpack and see what it says about women. And then secondly, we're going to look and see, is this a book for today when we look at violence? And I think that the reason why I want to bring this up is because this is the 2 areas that people ask me the most. Whenever I go around from churches, whenever I go around and speak in public places, people say, what do we do with all the references to women here in the Quran? And what do we do with the references to violence? A lot of Muslims claim that this is a book of peace. It's not a book of peace. A lot of Muslims claim that the man behind this book, Muhammad, is a man of peace. He's not a man of peace. A lot of people say that Islam, by its very nature, is a religion of peace. It is not a religion of peace. This is not a book for women. And we're going to go into those areas specifically. Nonetheless, we're opening up this chapter, asking this question, is this a universal book? Folks, you're going to find, once we get through this series, you will see this is not a universal book. It's not a book for you. It's not a book for me. It's not a book for anybody. Nonetheless, we've got to ask that question. We've got to delve into it. And we've got to unpack it. Well, here we are. There's that beautiful island. Some of the most gorgeous places on earth right here in the eastern coast of the United States. As we're traveling around and as we come across these beauty spots, I get out and we do these little talks, even though my cameraman's still petrified of that spider, which looks like has disappeared, and he's now underneath us somewhere, and he's scared to death that that's going to come up, the spider's going to come up and bite us. It's not going to bite us. Nonetheless, this has been great to be able to talk with you. This has been terrific to have this time with you as we move into this idea of universality. You come back to me, Muslims. Come back and tell me, where is this universal application for this book that is universal and applicable for you, for me, for everybody else that's watching this here, anywhere, at any time? God bless you. This is Jay, here on the eastern coast of the United States on a rather muggy day, rainy day, nonetheless gorgeous day. Over and out.